Day 56. And today, former FBI agents are asking a question that nobody in the mainstream media wants to touch. How did Savannah Guthrie know? In her three-part interview this week, Savannah said something that stopped at least two former FBI special agents cold. She described her mother being taken in the dead of night, in her pajamas, with no shoes, without her medication. She said it with specificity. She said it with certainty. And former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan, who told Fox News that he and his colleagues watched the interview several times and tore it apart, asked the question directly on national television. How did Savannah Guthrie know that at the time her mother left the house, she was clothed in her pajamas without her shoes on? That is a very specific material fact, and it caused us to pause and wonder. That question, and everything it implies about what law enforcement may know and has not told the public, is what this video is about. Because if Kaplan is right, if the FBI has video evidence that has never been publicly released, then everything we think we know about the state of this investigation needs to be reconsidered. The silence from law enforcement over the past month is not nothing. It may be something significant, something that is being held back deliberately, carefully, strategically, while the clock ticks and the investigation moves in directions the public cannot see. This is Forensic Disconnect, and this is Day 56. Before we go any further, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover the Nancy Guthrie case every single day as it develops, and today we are going somewhere that most channels are not willing to go. We are asking the questions that the former FBI agents are asking. We are following the thread wherever it leads. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, let's start from the beginning, because to understand why today's questions matter, you need to understand the full picture of what has happened in this case, not just this week. Not just the interview, the whole thing, from the very first moment. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She was born Nancy Long. She spent her adult life in Tucson, Arizona, building something quiet and lasting. A career rooted in public health and education at the University of Arizona, a family built on faith and resilience, a home in the Catalina foothills that she loved and called her safe haven. She had significant mobility limitations and lived with chronic back pain. She required daily heart medication to survive. She could not walk 50 yards on her own. She was, by any measure, a vulnerable adult. She was also the mother of Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognizable journalists in America, a woman who has co-anchored NBC's Today Show since 2012, who has interviewed presidents and covered the most significant news events of the past decade, who earns a salary that places her among the highest-paid anchors in broadcast television. And that combination, a vulnerable, elderly woman living alone in an upscale Arizona neighborhood, connected by blood to one of the most famous morning television personalities in the country, may have made Nancy Guthrie a target. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie and son-in-law Tommaso Cioni at their nearby home. Tommaso drove her back. Her garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. and closed 2 minutes later. That is the last confirmed normal moment of her life. In the early hours of February 1st, while she was almost certainly asleep, someone came to her home. Someone who had been there before. Someone who knew where the cameras were. Someone who had planned it. At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera captured the figure, masked, armed, wearing gloves, carrying a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack with what appeared to be a handgun in a holster positioned over his crotch. He approached the door. He tried to knock the camera loose. When he couldn't, he covered the lens with vegetation from a nearby potted plant. The camera went dark at 1:47 a.m. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker monitoring app disconnected from her phone. Investigators believe that is when she was taken. Her phone was inside the house. Her purse was inside the house. Her car keys were inside the house. Her medication was inside the house. The back door was propped open. The Ring camera had been yanked off the wall, and there was blood on the front step. Blood that was later confirmed by forensic testing to belong to Nancy Guthrie. Her family reported her missing around noon on February 1st. Within 24 hours, the case had shifted from a missing persons investigation to a criminal kidnapping investigation. The FBI joined. U.S. Customs and Border Protection joined. Bloodhound units, drones, aerial resources, all mobilized. None of it found Nancy. That was 56 days ago. Since then, the investigation has produced no public arrest, no named suspect, and no confirmed proof of life. Ransom notes demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin were sent to media outlets and to the family directly. The gloves found 2 miles from Nancy's home were traced by DNA to a local restaurant worker who has no connection to the case. New surveillance footage from cameras around the property showed nothing suspicious. The search for a vacant property near Nancy's home has not produced a public update. The forensic genetic genealogy being pursued on the DNA from inside the house is ongoing, a process that takes months and requires extensive investigative work even after a genetic match is found. For over a month, law enforcement has said almost nothing publicly. No press conferences, no updates, no new evidence releases. Just a task force of 20 to 24 people working behind closed doors on a case that appears, from the outside, to have gone cold. And then this week, Savannah Guthrie sat down with Hoda Kotb for a 3-part interview on the Today Show, and she said more in 3 days than investigators have said in 8 weeks, which is exactly why former FBI agents are now asking whether that was a coincidence or a strategy. Former FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas told Yahoo News directly that the timing of Savannah's interview was probably not coincidental. He said that because there are no major breakthroughs, no suspects identified, and no motive publicly released in the case, he really believes the interview was most likely coordinated between the sheriff's office, the FBI, and the Guthrie family. He said he has done this himself in past investigations, orchestrated a public event, a press conference, a media appearance, specifically to get a case back into the public eye, generate new tips, and apply psychological pressure on whoever is responsible. He said the interview's goals, from a law enforcement perspective, were almost certainly threefold: humanize Nancy as a person, persuade whoever took her to do the right thing, and keep the case alive in the public consciousness at the exact moment national attention was beginning to drift away. That last point is critical. National attention on a missing persons case does not last forever. It surges in the first weeks, peaks with each new development, and then, if nothing breaks, it begins to fade. The Guthrie case generated enormous national coverage in February. It dominated the news cycle for weeks, but by late March, over 50 days in with no arrest and no resolution, the coverage was thinning. Other stories were competing for space. Other headlines were pulling eyeballs away, and the family, and potentially the investigators working with them, made a decision. They were not going to let it fade. The interview this week was the largest single reinjection of public attention this case has seen since the FBI released the doorbell camera footage in February. It drove millions of views on the Today Show. It generated dozens of news articles. It pushed Nancy Guthrie's name back to the top of national search trends. And it created, deliberately or not, a new wave of tips to the FBI hotline that investigators can now process. Former FBI agent Jason Pack said exactly this. He said the interview keeps Nancy's name in the news at the exact moment national attention starts to drift. He said every time Savannah speaks, somebody sitting on information gets a little closer to picking up the phone. And he said that whoever took Nancy now has the FBI, $1 million reward, and the entire country looking for them. And they have been terrified for 2 months. In his words, which are worth reading slowly, suspects who have done something like this are usually terrified. Every knock on the door, every slow-moving car. They are waiting for the one tip that leads law enforcement straight to their doorstep and finally tells the world what happened to Nancy Guthrie. And this interview, Pack said, just made that wait significantly more unbearable. Now, let's talk about Stuart Kaplan, because Kaplan is the one who went somewhere that Trombitas and Pack did not. He asked a question that has no comfortable answer, and it is a question that deserves to be examined carefully, honestly, and in full. Kaplan appeared on Jesse Watters' Primetime on Fox News and said that he and his former colleagues had watched the interview several times and torn it apart, and what they found in it gave them pause. Specifically, this. Savannah said during the interview that her mother had been taken in the dead of night, in her pajamas, with no shoes, without her medicine. She said it as a statement of fact. She said it without hesitation. She said it in a way that communicated she knew it to be true. And Kaplan asked how. How did Savannah Guthrie know that at the time her mother left the house, she was clothed in her pajamas and without her shoes? That is not the kind of detail you infer from circumstance. That is not the kind of detail you guess. That is the kind of detail you know because someone told you, or because someone showed you. It is a specific material fact about what Nancy Guthrie was wearing at the moment of her abduction. And Kaplan said that hearing Savannah state it with such certainty leads him to believe that law enforcement perhaps has other video that has not been disclosed publicly, that captures Nancy at or near the moment she was taken. Think about what that would mean. We know the FBI recovered footage from the doorbell camera at the front of the house. We know additional images were obtained from cameras at the fence, the back of the house, the driveway, and the front of the garage. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed in its Friday statement that it continues to analyze images and videos captured by cameras, plural, multiple cameras, multiple sources. And we know from the FBI director's own public statements that data was recovered from the doorbell camera's back-end systems, even though Nancy did not have an active subscription. If there is additional video from a camera inside the house or from a neighbor's system, or from a traffic camera or a Ring doorbell down the street, video that shows Nancy at the moment she was taken, dressed in her pajamas and without her shoes, then investigators have far more information about what happened inside that house than they have ever acknowledged publicly. And they are choosing, for reasons that are not publicly stated, to hold that information close. That would also explain something else that has puzzled observers of this case from the beginning. The sheriff has said repeatedly that he believes he knows the motive. He has said the attack was targeted. He has refused to elaborate. He has said the case is active. He has said there is good evidence. He has held no press conference in over a month. All of this is consistent with an investigation that has significant evidence it is not ready to reveal. Evidence that, if revealed, could alert the suspect or suspects and compromise what is being built. Kaplan made 2 additional observations that deserve careful attention. The first is about the singular versus plural. He noted that Savannah, throughout the interview, refers to the kidnapper in the singular. Not the kidnappers, not they. He, the kidnapper. The person who took her mother. Kaplan said this is not a small thing. Either it reflects what Savannah genuinely believes based on what she knows, in which case it tells us something about the family's assessment of the evidence, or it reflects what investigators have told the family, in which case it tells us something about what law enforcement believes about how many people were involved. This matters because it stands in contrast to some of the expert theories that have been offered publicly. Retired Pima County homicide detective Kurt Dabb said he believes the abduction involved between 2 and 4 people and that the home was surveilled in advance. Former boss of the sheriff Rick Castigar suggested multiple people were involved and that Nancy may have been taken to Mexico. If Savannah's consistent use of the singular is meaningful, if it reflects law enforcement's actual assessment, then the multiple suspects theory may be less solid than it appears, or it may simply reflect the family's perception of a case where the full picture is still not known. The second observation from Kaplan is harder and more controversial. He said that statistically, cases like this generally lead back to someone within the inner circle. He made this comment carefully, without accusing any specific person. He was citing a statistical reality about kidnapping investigations, that in a significant percentage of cases, the person responsible for the crime has some connection to the victim, or the victim's family. Law enforcement cleared the entire Guthrie family early in the investigation, and that clearance has been publicly confirmed multiple times by both the sheriff and the FBI. There is no public evidence pointing at anyone connected to Nancy's immediate circle. But Kaplan's observation generated a furious response from CNN's Jake Tapper, who called the speculation on Fox News truly depraved and wrote on social media that Savannah and her family's pain is not fun and glib content. That clash captures something important about where this case stands on day 56. After nearly 2 months with no resolution, the public is hungry for any framework that makes sense of what is happening, any question, any theory, any lead that opens a door. And when those questions come from credentialed former law enforcement professionals, not anonymous internet commentators, not tabloid speculation, but people with decades of experience inside the FBI, they deserve to be examined, not accepted uncritically, not dismissed defensively, examined, honestly and carefully with full acknowledgement of what is confirmed and what is not. What is confirmed? The interview happened this week. Law enforcement, according to at least one former FBI agent with direct experience in this type of coordinated public outreach, likely approved or coordinated Savannah's participation. Specific new details were disclosed publicly for the first time: the back door propped open, the Ring camera yanked off the wall, the ransom notes Savannah believes are real. And at least one of those details, what Nancy was wearing when she was taken, has raised a question that experienced investigators are now asking publicly. What is not confirmed? Whether there is additional video evidence that has not been released, whether there was one kidnapper or multiple, whether the ransom notes that Savannah believes are real have been verified as genuine by the FBI, whether the case is genuinely close to a breakthrough, or whether investigators are as far from an arrest as the public silence suggests. And what remains the central, unchanging, devastating fact of this entire case: Nancy Guthrie is still missing. 56 days. No arrest, no named suspect, no confirmed proof of life. An 84-year-old woman, taken in the night, in her pajamas, without her medication, and not yet found. Now let's talk about the FBI's forensic genetic genealogy work, because it is one of the most important and least understood aspects of this investigation, and it deserves more attention than it has gotten. Forensic genetic genealogy is the technique that was used to identify Brian Kohberger in the University of Idaho murders in 2022, a case that had generated enormous public attention and seemed completely stalled until DNA from the crime scene was compared against genealogy databases and a family tree was built from the result. The process works like this. Investigators take DNA from the crime scene, in this case, DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home, and upload it to a genealogy database. The database searches for partial matches, which indicate that the unknown person shares genetic material with someone in the database. From those partial matches, investigators build out a family tree, identifying possible relatives of the unknown person and then narrowing down from there to find individuals who fit the physical description of the suspect and were in the relevant geographic area at the relevant time. The process is slow. It requires patience, resources, and a great deal of investigative work even after the genetic connections are established. Finding that an unknown person's DNA partially matches someone in a genealogy database does not tell you who the unknown person is. It tells you who their relatives are, and from there you have to work backward. If there are multiple possible relatives who fit the profile, each one has to be investigated independently. That takes time, but it has worked in cases that seemed impossible. It has identified killers who had evaded justice for decades, and it is being pursued here, on DNA recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home, by a task force that has been working this case for 56 days and is not giving up. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed in its Friday statement that laboratory analysis is ongoing. It confirmed that images and videos from cameras are being analyzed. It said it will not comment on the details or the status of this analysis, which tells you that there is analysis happening. There is evidence being processed. There are things law enforcement knows that it has not told the public. And the question that Stuart Kaplan started asking this week, the question that the pajama detail put into sharp focus, is how much of what investigators know is being held back, and why? The answer to that question most likely is because releasing it would compromise the investigation, because whoever took Nancy is still out there. Because the moment you tell a suspect or suspects what you know, they adjust, they change their behavior, they move, they destroy evidence, they make it harder to catch them. Law enforcement holds evidence back in active investigations because holding it back gives investigators an advantage. And in a case where no arrest has been made and no suspect has been named, investigators need every advantage they can get. Which brings us back to the interview, and to what it means that 3 separate former FBI agents, Trombitas, Pack, and Kaplan, each looked at that interview this week and saw something different, but each concluded that it was significant in ways that go beyond the emotional, that it contained information, that it raised questions, that it did something to this case, either advanced it or complicated it or both, in ways that are not yet fully visible from the outside. Somebody knows something. That is what Savannah said this week, with a desperation in her voice that cut through everything else. Even if that something is just that someone in the Tucson area has noticed something strange over the past 2 months. Even if it is just a conversation that seemed insignificant at the time, somebody knows. And the FBI, according to people who have worked there, has more leads in this case than most investigations ever generate. The case is, in the words of former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, red hot behind the scenes. This week's interview was designed to make it hotter. And somewhere out there, in a house, in a car, in a room somewhere in southern Arizona, or across the border, or anywhere on this continent, there is a person who knows exactly what happened to Nancy Guthrie on the night of January 31st into the early hours of February 1st. A person who knows what she was wearing. A person who knows where she went. A person who has been, according to a former FBI agent, who has spent his career studying people in exactly this situation, terrified for 2 months. Every knock on the door, every slow-moving car, every news alert on their phone. Every time Savannah Guthrie appears on television, they are waiting for the tip that ends it all. So are we. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, anything at all, no matter how small or how uncertain, please contact the FBI right now. The number is 1-800-CALL-FBI. That is 1-800-225-5324. You can also submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov. You can call the Pima County Sheriff's Department directly at 520-351-4900. Tips are completely anonymous. The combined reward from the Guthrie family and the FBI is over $1 million and can be paid in cash. One tip, one person, one phone call. That is all it takes to change everything. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is 5 feet tall. She has silver hair and blue eyes. She was taken from her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, in the early hours of February 1st, 2026. She was in her pajamas. She had no shoes. She did not have her heart medication. She is someone's mother. She is someone's grandmother. She is the woman who showed her daughter how to survive the unsurvivable, and whose daughter is now doing exactly that every single day while searching for her. She deserves to come home. Hit the like button if this video made you think. Subscribe if you haven't already. We are here every single day until this case is resolved. Drop a comment with your thoughts on the pajama detail, on the coordinated interview theory, on what you think the FBI knows that it hasn't told us. We read every single comment. And more than once, something a viewer said in the comments has led us to something worth covering. We will be back tomorrow for day 57, because Nancy Guthrie deserves to have people paying attention. And because this week, for the first time in a long time, the right people are asking the right questions.